Welcome. We are visiting the values of the Constitution of India. In the context, we have conceived the project to visit the growth and functional history of the judicial setup of state of Haryana. The reference we have taken for concrete, realistic view, the expressions of Justice S.D. Anand in his three books. Now, the list of instances, list of events, list of circumstances, list of situations in these three books of Justice and S.D. Anand are in fact very large. And these large number of institutional interactions of different constituents of the same functional operators, like a judge and a lawyer, judge and litigant, then the judge in judicial side and the administrative side supervision, the public complaints, the way public complaints are dealt with and are adjudicated, then the judge on the administrative side as a registrar, as a district and session judge vigilance, as LR, and then this administrative posting and functioning of a judicial officer coming in interaction with the other judicial courts and judicial officers, as well conducting on the administrative side. This way, very large number of situations, events, interactions stand recorded. As Justice S.D. Anand has 5 decades participation in one form or the other, in one authority or the other. So this chain of events, these chain of situations, as these are, give us really very practical scenario and spectrum to have realistic evaluation of the role of a human factor. So today, first of all, each one of us shall try a definition of a human factor. By human factor, we firstly mean that a natural person discharging the duties of legal person. Individual as natural person discharging the duties of a judicial officer, prosecutor, investigating officer, etc., would mean that natural person and legal person are two distinct persons, and how gap remains with respect to the legal expectations from the natural person acting as a legal person. Like that, we can attempt precise definition or precise frame to define human factor. Now, as natural person, let us first have a focus upon individual as a natural person. Individual as a natural person can be viewed in the context of functional, institutionalized, functional frame responsibility for a natural person. The two, if we have a visit at the expression of a sheet here, it can be innocence and ego. So to have appreciation of human factor as the difference of values as natural person from that of a legal person. So institutionalized responsibilities to be discharged by the natural person are to be considered to reach at the definition of a human factor. To reach at that, first of all, let us focus upon the basic features of natural person. In a natural person, innocence and ego are the two extreme banks of the values, the functional efficiency, the functional spectrum, the functional range within the existence phenomenon of human beings as natural persons can be viewed taking innocence as one bank of a river and ego as the other bank of the river. This will further, at next layer, will take us to consciousness on one side and knowledge on the other side. That life, natural life phenomenon within human frame, which initially can be taken as a river flowing between two banks, one bank being innocence and other bank being the ego. Now this river as flows further and comes in interactions with other rivers, or in a way when this human being grows and his innocence and ego come in interaction with the reality, then we may say that this initial river which was flowing between the innocence and ego banks will take the flow format as a river of values between the pair of banks, and one bank be taken as a consciousness and other bank will be taken as a knowledge. So the initial life river, life as a reservoir of values flowing between the two banks of innocence and ego of its own, with interaction in the reality growth and reality interaction of the institutional setup, means the natural order, when is transiting and transforming within the frame of the reality of human institutional functional operators, then this river, this life values river flowing between innocence and ego may be taken as has taken another frame, has transited into another river whose one bank is consciousness and another bank is a knowledge. A step ahead, when this life continues flowing as natural values are set up within the worldly reality setup, then the two things which will come to prominent focus are that this flow is ultimately is proceeding ahead as a river, with one bank being a natural order and other bank being the logical systems. These transitional flow of a river between the banks of innocence and ego, then transforming as a river flowing within the banks of consciousness and knowledge, when becomes the ultimate flow ahead, it would be as if it is flowing between the natural order and the logical systems. Now, the natural order has the natural tendency to go for the universal values bliss, while the logical systems will have inherent flow for self-centered happiness. Now, in this background, when we have to have evaluation of the role of human factor in discharge of duties by individuals as institutionalized functionaries of the judicial apparatus, a judicial system, then naturally we have to revisit all these values and have to reach at a realistic definition of human factor. Once we will be having a realistic frame for evaluation of the human factor, then we have to proceed further to conceive as to how precisely this factor, the human factor, is to be considered to understand as that this factor does not cause injustice. So, the human factor to be not a hindrance factor, not a deviation factor, not a distortion factor for the justice delivery system is going to become a challenge for us. It is this challenge which is to be visited. It is this challenge which is to be appreciated. It is this challenge which is to be answered. We as lawyers, we as students of law, we as citizens, we as litigants are very deeply concerned about this factor, as this factor has great potentialities to mark its stamp, seal, presence upon the justice as end fruit, as human factor is having a definite impact, as there is a definite seal and stamp of the human factor upon the end fruit flowing through the justice system. So, this factor is to be visited time and again, and it is this factor which ultimately will compel us that we shall always remain conscious right from the selection of the individuals for institutionalized responsibilities, the way the individuals vested with the institutionalized responsibilities are to be trained, to be supervised, and all other connected aspects are ultimately coming within the domain of a human factor. We as individuals, we as human beings, we as mortal beings, when attempt to have our own justice system independent of the natural order, then this factor is going to be the central pillar of whole superstructure for the foundational expectation values from the justice delivery system. Let each one of us visit these instances as these have been elaborated in these books of Justice S.D. Anand, and then let us categorize them, and then each category of instances shall be visited so that we can have a realistic view, and we shall be conscious as to how we shall proceed, how each individual is to meet this factor, how collectively we have to meet this factor, and how we have to reach at the answers for many, many ecos which are in the public domain as to injustice standing caused because of the human factor. As we have been face to face with the irregularities, illegalities, crimes and sin domains in the previous session, so those particular situations of irregularities, illegalities, crimes and sins happening because of a human factor, and as a result there is going to be very deep impact, there being a highly intensified strains upon the justice system. Therefore, this factor is the factor which is to be visited consciously. It is not only the instances which are coming to our notice in the form of these expressions as are of the books under reference of Justice S.D. Anand. We can well imagine that there would be very large number of instances of different degrees of intensity which as such are not in a print form. However, otherwise the echoes of such instances are very loudly marking their presence in the public domain. We have to consider all that, and then we have to visit our ancestors' times and to see how our ancestors have met such situations. The ancient wisdom is definitely going to supply us enough values which can be utilized to have a proper answer for the distortions because of the human factor. This ultimately may take us to philosophical domain, but this domain is to be visited. We cannot feel shy of visiting the philosophical domain, as the jurisprudence is nothing but the philosophy of justice. Jurisprudence is the discipline which is to be visited, and the same is to raise and answer this situation of the alarm because of the distortions due to the human factor in our justice delivery system under the Constitution of India, to have a concrete, realistic view, to have concrete, realistic appreciation when we will be restricting our study, restricting our analysis in respect of the judicial apparatus of state of Haryana, then I think our answer will be more concrete and more realistic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.